anytime I find myself stuck now, I recognize that often the reason I'm stuck is because I'm focusing on the output and I'm not focusing on my input, right? So output, I've got to raise 100 million rand for my business. Output, I've got to get 300% growth for, in customers. Output, I've got to get 25. Yeah, that's all output. But what you got to focus on is input. What are the things I've got to do, and how do I do those things intentionally, deliberately, and try to get better every single time? Every meeting, every impact conversation with one of my staff members, every engagement with a client or a potential client, every single one of those things. How do I focus on that moment? Because actually the output is a sum total of how those things come about. So when you are at the dojo and you are being graded and you are going through the process of trying to attain your black belt or your brown belt, that's what everybody sees as the output. But what actually went in was that malleable construct of time where you're trying to perfect every single movement, right? My sensei then at the time, who was also a Sifu because he did Wing Chun, Sifu Claude, we were kind of, having the conversation. I was like, I want to come back, yada, yada, fish paste. And he started giving me Chinese philosophy to read. And I'd never read philosophy before. The first one he gave me was like a poem. It was like literally an A4 page. And he said to me, this is first bit of philosophy I'm going to give you. Go read this. And then he said, and just stick it on your wall for like 3 months. And the opening line says, there can be no denying Kung Fu is hard work. Then it says, but as with everything in life, you get out of it exactly what you put in. That line is still entrenched in my head even today, right? So he gave me that. And for 3 months, if I didn't feel like going in, I just read it over and over. And then you wake up and you go. And then he started maturing me into philosophy. So then he'd give me Nietzsche, or he'd give me somebody else. And what I recognized was that the masters didn't actually focus on output. They focused on mastery. Right. So Beethoven didn't focus on how does he write the greatest symphony of all time. He just worried about the next note, just that next note, and making sure that it was melodic, harmonic, and it worked. Right. If you talk to any performer, Boyz II Men is my favorite boy band of all time. But if you listen to a decent Boyz II Men album, I can tell you for free that they're not focusing on the next song. It's just, how do we make this next note and this next harmony work? Right. So in today's world, I think of Instagram and the World Wide Web and the pressure of Jeff Bezos being worth $200 billion. And now every single entrepreneur is going, well, I want to be worth $200 billion. Is we forget that he's just at a very different stage of his momentum journey, right? And so you're not, you're literally to the power of 1,000 away from where he is. And so you got to focus on where you are in that next part of that journey. And that for me was probably what was the most incredible part of that part of learning in my life. Strategy, sales, leadership. And I start first with leadership and particularly self-leadership, because that's a big part of the curriculum nobody talks about. So we always think about leadership. We think about the general in the army, right? The guy who marshals the troops, the master tactician, and I use the word guy very deliberately because that's the iconography. If I say general, go back to this construct of identity, there's been a picture sold to us of who a general is, right? So we've got this alpha male, kind of square cut hair, marine looking fella who's like, I'm the general and I'm the boss. I've got all the, so that's what people think about. But I'm more interested in what was that guy thinking the morning he woke up, knowing he's about to send 100,000 young men and women into the field of battle and they might not go home to their families. I'm more interested in that conversation. I'm not interested in how does he show up. I'm interested in what is he telling himself. Because how does he show up is, again, outcome. It's output. We're seeing him standing on the stage, right? But what led to that? How does he have so much self-belief? And how does he have so much courage? Even in the face of adversity, how is this guy still believing we can win the war? So we focus a lot on leadership, self-leadership, breaking down narratives. Man, I cannot tell you how many stories people have in their heads that are deeply embedded that they're not even aware the story is there. They're not aware that the script is playing every single day. And so they're living their lives in autopilot, right? I'll tell you a big one. And I work in the venture space. So a particularly big one in the venture space, particularly in the continent of Africa, is the idea that to get a business started, I need somebody to fund me first. So the first thing I say to entrepreneurs is, why? Why do you need a funder? Well, because I go, no, you don't need a funder. You need a customer. Get off your ass, make something, go sell it. See, get started. Now you go, I got the little thing. I go out and I sell it. Somebody pays me $1. Oh, okay, great. Can I do it again? Sure. Iterate and iterate and iterate. And before you know it, I've got $1,000 in my bank. So did you need money or did you need a customer? Right? But it's narrative. It's these stories that people have told themselves. So the question was, how's our curriculum structured? First, leadership, self-leadership, personal leadership. How do you show up to your family? How do you show up to your friends? How do you show up to yourself in the mirror? Because, that moment will come too, right? Where you do something that you know is wrong, or you fail, or you're not proud of yourself. When you look at you in the mirror, what do you say? Right? We actually do an exercise called So What? So, hey, Tom, you're on impact theory. What would your life look like if you lost the business? You go, well, it would look like X, Y, and Z. And I go, and if that's where you were, so what? You go, well, then that's where you were, so what? And what happens is 7 or 8 so what's later, people get to what is their actual fear. So what? So I'd be poor again, and I don't want that. I remember that. I remember going to bed hungry. I don't want to be poor again. Oh, okay. So actually the reason you work like a dog and you don't see your kids and you've completely no balance and you're completely overweight is because you're scared of poverty. Just face it. Now you can look it in the face and say, poverty, I'm scared. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that you haven't conquered that fear. Just be aware of it, right? It can be an incredible motivator, but you have to know that it's there. So we focus a lot on the so what technique, and I've seen people break down and cry. We had I'll never forget a young lady, one of our classes, and the whole conversation was, so how are things going? And it starts off, everybody wears the mask, right? Oh, everything's great. Business is good. No. And I said, so what's keeping you up at night? Well, I've got this small little worry. And if that happened, so what? And if that happened, so what? And if that happened, so what? And what it actually came down to was she was a mother of 3. She'd conceived children very late in her life, and in her marital life, it was her second marriage. And she grew up without parents. And she didn't want to be the mom who would abandon her kids, right? Because she knows what that was like. So that was for her an incredibly scary thing. And she was like, I can't have that. I can't do that. But what she didn't realize, it was holding her back. So she wasn't growing her business. She wasn't going to the next stage because it would demand more of her. And she didn't want to give that up because of this hidden fear. So strategy, leadership for me is important. And then strategy. You just can't operate in a world and not understand how to play a chess game. It doesn't work that way. And you always have to think 3 steps ahead of your competitors. You've got to think 3 steps ahead of your market. And you've got to do scenario planning. What happens if scenario A happens, scenario B, and scenario C? How will I react then? And then, as I think this is the most important skill for any human being to learn, is the ability to sell. And I don't know why the ability to sell, for some other strange reason, became like a bad thing. We started talking about these used car salesmen. I was just like, well, you're selling yourself every day anyway. You've got to sell yourself to your partner about why they should stay married or in a relationship with you. You've got to sell yourself to you every morning about why you're a kick-ass person, right? Otherwise, you're really going to be grumpy because you don't like yourself. You're selling every day anyway. So how do we develop a curriculum that teaches you how to sell in a manner that is true, authentic, and enables you to have an impact in the world, right? And so those are kind of the 3 tenets of what we do.